name's Tom Marion. I'm chairman of the Public Works Committee. We're meeting tonight, 6 p.m. Tuesday, September 5th, 2017, in the first floor conference room at City Hall in Wisconsin Rapids. We'll go around the table to introduce everybody who's here this evening.
Steve Wolf, Alderman.
Joe Terry, Director of Public Works.
Joe Egstead, City Engineer.
Scott Kellogg, Alderman.
Adam Burnick, Waterline.
Okay, thanks. Item number 1, we'll call ourselves the meeting to order. Item number 2, review the DPW report.
So I didn't get that in your packet, so I passed out a copy of the Public Works report. Point out a couple of highlights. Out at the airport, Taxiway B West construction began. It looks like it's well underway, and what that project is removing some of the oldest pavement that's out at the airport and the existing taxiway that approaches that runway at a sharp angle, runs it parallel to the runway, and then tees in as part of a multi-phase project. The rest of the project will depend on state and federal funding, but it's pretty exciting to see that work taking place, and I was out there today. There's several jets parked out there as well, so a lot of activity. Under buildings and grounds, a few highlights. The tennis courts by Witterfield have been painted for pickleball play, and the staff had some crack filling performed there as well. That crack filling activity is not typical for a tennis court. That's not a preferred type of maintenance, but given the conditions of the court and the poor conditions of the courts, that's about the best we could do. And so it's really a stopgap measure to last for a few years. Hopefully we'll be looking at replacing those. Some surveillance cameras, communications have been updated at Robinson Park. There was some vandalism out there the other day, and I haven't heard yet, but I anticipate that the cameras caught the vandals, hopefully well enough that the police department could identify them and take appropriate action. If you haven't been out there, there's some pavement rehabilitation and grading work done out at Robinson Park. The shelter building, there was kind of that step from the shelter area onto the outside area. That's been corrected. So for the events that are out there, if there's dancing and things like that, it's just a lot safer, and aesthetically it's a big improvement. And the splash pad at Meade Field is substantially complete. There's a fairly extensive punch list of final items to finish up and a few adjustments that need to be made. But we did open it up, and the kids have been having a lot of fun out there. We will be open tentatively through September into early October. Of course, it's weather dependent. If we start getting some cold nights, we need to winterize that to prevent any damage to it. Under our streets, our first street project is the underground work is complete, and we're now waiting on contractor work. We do have the multi-use trail portion of that project to do, but because of delays in receiving the permits and need to get our other projects ready for contractors to finish up before the cold sets in, we've pulled off of that project, and we're now on Washington Avenue, where we're working on the infrastructure there, or Washington Street. This fall then we'll go back and finish up all but the paving work on the multi-use trail, and if we get the opportunity to get it paved, we will. Chip seal work is complete. 144,000 square yards of chip seal work. Really proud of the staff. They did a good job of cleaning up. Chip seal work is generally, if you've had it done in front of your house, it's not a lot of fun to deal with, but it really extends the service life of the pavement. Typically a pavement design is for 20 years. With chip seal in most places, you get an extra 10 years out of it. We've got some roads that are over 60 years old that because of the subsoil conditions and keeping that asphalt sealed, we're pretty fortunate to extend the service life sometimes up to 60 years. On First Street, the lift station is complete and has been fully commissioned. It's operating. And for the wastewater department, after a hiatus from being able to do pipe televising due to problems with the camera and the tractor, that equipment has been repaired and is back in service. The staff's really playing catch up. And as a result, with the amount of work that's expected of that team and their equipment and the high priority that we've placed on getting that work done, the wastewater utility is looking at updating their camera system to something more reliable. The one that they have works pretty well. I wouldn't say it's obsolete, but certainly it's getting towards the end of its service life. I think it's around 9 years old, and for the amount of work we need to do, it needs to be dependable. I think I got a couple other things. The West Side Lift Station engineering design has begun. We've had a 30% design progress meeting. We expect that design work to be done for the lift station this fall. We're going to try to take advantage of some Clean Water Fund principal forgiveness. And if we can get that application in this fall, we may qualify for that. The mayor, city staff, and an older person had toured 2 aquatic centers in the state, Pollock Pool in Oshkosh and Herb Pool in Appleton, to learn about their design, some of the similarities to what's being proposed here in Rapids, looking for some areas where they may have some problems that we can learn from, understand their staffing and scheduling, the services that they provide, programming, and so forth. Also, and I think it's well suited for this committee meeting and some consideration moving forward, I did perform some research relating to our city's streets. And if we take a look at some of the ages of the streets and when they were installed, we've got about 66 miles of streets that were constructed or reconstructed prior to 1980. Those streets are going to need replacement in the next decade or two. On average, you're looking at about 3.3 miles per year. Our current budget and engineering staff and construction crew is well taxed right now at about 0.8 miles of street per year. And so our budget proposal for 2018 includes Chase Street and High Street. We are considering Van Buren. It doesn't involve any other utility work, but tentatively Van Buren was on the 2019 capital plan. That project is grading and curb. We're going to avoid the intersections with, we'll be gapping intersections because the utilities run the other way. We're going to propose that. We'll see if we can make it work within the budget constraints that we have. But that's something that I think we need to be very cognizant of. We've got a lot of streets. The conditions are, 150 miles of streets, and if we're doing less than a mile a year, you can do the math, and the street won't last 150 years. So it's something that, in the next 10 years is going to be a stark reality. And the reality of doing the work isn't something that we're going to be able to undertake in a year. There's going to be engineering department planning, staff planning, construction planning. Most likely, most of that work would be done with contract work, construction oversight. It'll be something that it's going to require a lot of planning in advance, and we're in the process of putting together, what that may look like if and when we have to make some changes. So that's a highlight of the director's report. I'll make this available on our city's website at wisconsinrapids.org.
I just had a few questions or comment.
Yeah.
You said they sold over 8,000 gallons of jet fuel. Compared to what? I mean, what is it normally? I was just curious.
That's a good question. I don't know. I'd have to double check with Jeremy, but 8,000 gallons is very noteworthy. My recollection is a couple hundred gallons.
I think it's more than last month even.
Yes, and the the expectation for, yeah, the expectation for jet traffic, specifically for the golf course, is tremendous from September through the end of October. It was suggested that essentially take the amount of traffic that we've had over the last 6 months, double that, and that's what you're going to have in the next 2 months. And that's been the trend at Bandon Dunes out west. And so Jeremy's expecting a lot of airport traffic
Well, it's
in the next 2
income
months.
too, coming in, you know.
It is.
Revenue. Yeah, another question. You mentioned you have pickleball lines at the courts. Could we put that on our web so that people know that they
Sure can.
You know, just have a little episode on that, because some people may not know you can play pickleball over there, and even though we have the lines now. And then on the east side of the river, they marked a lot of sidewalks to replace slabs and grade them, or sand them, or whatever you
Grind 'em, right.
Grind them, they ground them. But when are they scheduled, just for the community in that side, when might they start replacing slabs? Do you have any idea, or are they gonna do it this fall?
Yeah,
Oh.
they may not get to all of it because we've identified about twice as much work there for full slab replacements than what we expected. And likely within the next 3 to 4 weeks, the contractor will be back to do those. So it's a different contractor. That's
Right.
part of the change in pace, I guess, is that the one contractor was doing the grinding, and then the other contractor, he'll be back in on the 11th to finish up some stuff on First Street North, and then he'll be concentrating on all these sidewalk repairs.
And I mentioned last time, looking into mudjacking, have we explored that for some slab? Because I know along Witter, the slabs are like this that could be mudjacked rather than the costly replacing them.
We have, and the information that we received on mudjacking is,
Not worth it?
nope,
Okay.
it's risky, and
Just curious.
yeah. We've got a couple other areas where it'd be well suited, preferred, along the Expressway Bridge. We've got some washout behind the wall that's washing down onto the multi-use trail, and there's 2 slabs of concrete that have settled, large sidewalk slabs, that if we could mudjack that, would really resolve the issues. And our street department staff's researched it, talked to several different contractors, and have come to the unfortunate conclusion that it's not
Not worth
it's not really a
At least we
possibility
explored
for it,
it.
but we did explore it, yes.
That is good?
Yeah.
Okay. Robinson Park that's a good addition there, the paving and that. You don't have to worry about falling off that edge that's there.
Yeah.
Yep, when you turn around, if you're talking to somebody, just turn around, and you're standing there, and, you knew it was there, but you forget you were standing there.
Yeah, if you haven't taken a look at it, I encourage you to do so. It's really turned out nice.
It's a nice project.
Proud of it.
Okay, item number 3, discuss the DOT decision to remove the 2nd Avenue Expressway to Gaynor Avenue project from the 6-year plan.
So Wisconsin DOT Transportation Supervisor Mike Kretschmer had contacted me on August 21st to inform the city that the DOT has been asked to reprioritize state highway projects. And as a result, the DOT has removed the 2nd Avenue South project from the Expressway to Gaynor Avenue from the state's 6-year plan. Mr. Kretschmer indicated the design of the project will be completed, and that a revised project agreement will be drafted and presented to the city, that among other things, the design cost responsibility will be frozen in the event that design standards change in the future. The city wouldn't be on the hook for that. He stated that the project will still go through the plan specification and estimates process in November, which will make the project otherwise ready to let for bid. He stated that due to the scope and relatively small cost of the project has a chance to be fit in if other projects are delayed or there are funds available. I'm going to try to get this back up on the screen here. Just excuse me for a second. The action by the DOT to pull that project at this time causes both political and financial concerns to staff. A significant amount of city staff time and financial resources have been spent on the design of the project and real estate negotiations and purchases. A number of residents will lose their direct access from 2nd Avenue South, and some have begun to take action in preparation for the project. Of course, that has no definitive construction date. If the project is not performed, 2nd Avenue South will require some maintenance, and not knowing when the project may take place results in challenges in deciding what maintenance activities to perform. Some maintenance activities are inexpensive but short-term, and others are more expensive and long-term. The staff is recommending that the committee consider addressing a letter from the Director of Public Works, Mayor, and City Council to the DOT and our state elected officials, including Representative Krug, Senator Teston, and Governor Walker, expressing the challenges the city now faces by delaying this project indefinitely. I think it's going to be as frustrating for the residents there because they're anxious about the project and have expressed concerns, and now not knowing what the future holds is frustrating for them as well.
Yes. I think we should go ahead and write the letter.
I would agree. I mean, we're counting on it. It's been in the works for 3 years or more.
Yeah.
I know it's more than 3 years, so.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, and so it's not a surprise to the DOT. And if they have something new on their docket, you think that this would have priority. That's all I'm saying. Since we've been counting on it for so long, where someone else just put theirs on the list.
This is part of a large problem with the state's ability to fund its highway system and the state transportation budget. These projects, a number of projects have been pulled. Other projects that are important aren't getting even a chance to be reviewed because there's such a backlog. And this is an example that affects our residents directly, and I think I can get something drafted, have staff bring it to our next committee meeting, and if that document looks good, then we can get that shipped off.
Will you be sending, do the residents around this area know about this?
Not yet.
Okay, so I'll have to send them letters, or
Right.
be nice for them to write letters too. Yeah.
How soon are we gonna be looking at doing maintenance work on the street there, possibly?
Well, we're preparing for chip seal south of the roundabout for next year.
Right. I would anticipate with some of the gaps that are there, we may have to do something next year. The question is what type of maintenance do we perform? The
Right.
problem right now is that the cracks that were crack filled are right in the wheel track, and so cars tend to pull that out. And so we may be faced with some asphalt cutting and patching, and then chip sealing over the top of everything to even it out. So that's a moderately expensive fix, and if it's going to be a year or two, we could live with it, but it's hard to say, we just don't know.
Yeah.
So on the DOT project, we're expecting funding from the state to get that done?
State was funding
100%.
of the construction. The city covered, the real estate costs, and was there a share in the design?
And a share in the design, yeah.
What is the dollar amount on the state funding?
500,000, I think, for construction, somewhere in that ballpark.
I mean, I understand sending a letter to the elected officials in Madison, but I don't think you're really gonna get anywhere with them probably. I mean, they'll just say, sorry, that's the way it is. That's just my gut feeling on it. But what if there's a way that the city covers the cost of that construction project and then they ask the state for reimbursement on it? Since the state initially said that they were gonna cover it, I mean, that might be the best trade-off that we could get with the state, is say, okay, you know, we'll go ahead and do this, but you can reimburse the city for the cost of it then.
I don't anticipate that the state
They wouldn't do that?
would do that, but we can certainly make the ask.
Have they ever done something like that? I guess
I
that's a
think
question
on
of mine. I don't know.
high cost local bridge, I think the expressway bridge was done that way,
Okay.
I think. At least that's what I've heard over the years, is that was a unique situation. But I'm not aware of any other project where the locals funded it and then had the state reimburse, but I can certainly do some research.
Cause I mean, if we already got resources tied up into this, it'd be a shame to lose all that progress and have to shelve it.
If we have to do repairs with, I don't know what it would cost, but let's say it costs 80,000 to 100,000 for repairs. And that's money, bad money out in a sense, because it
Right,
still is
yeah.
gonna be replaced. But to come up with you said, how much, 500,000?
I think it's around that, yeah.
That's a big chunk of change, but if we can do it, that's an interesting concept. I kind of believe in the letters, in the sense, I understand that people could ignore them, but they need, I think the state needs to know the impact of their decisions. You know, that it is just not, I'm sure they do, they're not, I'm sure they're sensitive, but I think letters indicating the impact that it has in our small community might help too, so, I don't know.
I mean, I think, at least in my experience, a lot of those decisions are like decisions that you face, that if there isn't a lot of community input or feedback, you know, you move forward with your own, you know, what you feel is the best thing to do, and if there's a lot of feedback, that may change how you feel about it a little bit.
Yeah, let them know that we're here and we heard them, but let them know what that's doing to us.
Right.
You know, with the impact that it's doing to us, and I guess if, Joe, if you can find out,
I can
the
do
question that Steve has raised, but we write the letter at the same time.
And how long we've been counting on it.
Right.
So it sounds like it would just.
Yeah.
And we've done repairs to it. In other words, we've done some patchwork leading up to this reconstruction. So it sounds like we haven't tried to maintain it.
Right.
You know, so.
Okay, is that okay with the
Yep.
committee here then? Okay. Item 4, review proposed 2018 Public Works capital projects / budget estimates.
Okay, so in your packet, there's a list of projects for 2018. These are consistent with the exception of Van Buren from 8th to 10th with what was reviewed this spring. And that's High Street, from 7th to 10th Avenue North, and then again from 12th to 17th Avenue North. Chase Street from 17th Avenue South to 21st Avenue South, and then Van Buren. These three projects are significant projects, and that they're sanitary, storm, water, and street work. $2.4 million for that work. In addition is design work from the engineering department for 2019 and 2020 preliminary survey work and preliminary design work. For 2019, we've got Washington Street from 12th Street North to 18th Street North. East Grand, which is a DOT project. 7th Street South, that's one block from East Grand to Oak. That needs to get done prior to the East Grand project. And then a small part of East Grand that's not part of the DOT project, and that's from the bridge to 3rd Street South. We've got a short piece there to make that a complete project. $54,000 in design work. We've got sidewalk outlay, some traffic control work, some storm sewer outlay. For aquatics and riverfront outlay, we don't have the aquatics portion in there yet because there hasn't been really a final decision on that. We do have the phasing for the East Riverbank project listed in here. And then we have highway rehabilitation, and that is connecting highways that primarily are concrete work that we take care of on our connecting highway system. So you can see the summary, $2.4 million in reconstruction projects, about $300,000 in sidewalk outlay, $200,000 in traffic control, $80,000 in storm sewer utility outlay, $2.4 million in riverfront, and about $456,000 in highway rehabilitation for a total of $5.9 million. And that is trying to follow our current trends. That doesn't get us to a sustainable level, but at this point there's no reasonable way to do that with the staffs and budgets that we currently have. And Adam, I don't know if you had any comments or...
No, I went through projected numbers for the complete construction of it, so that'll actually go through your engineering and street department, as well as our crew, to try to get an idea of where we would fall, to present it to GEM for going to the commission for deciding it.
Right, because these numbers don't include the material costs
Yep.
and other utility costs
Yep,
involved in
exactly.
the water main construction.
And Joe has provided us in the past with numbers for estimates of the project, but sometimes it doesn't always include what our crews will be doing, so hopefully these numbers, I'll probably review them a little bit and compare them to what we have prior to making our budget decisions.
Sounds good. Not looking for any formal approvals, just wanted to give a review of kind of where that project list is, and you know, our initial estimates, these are more of a engineering estimate then, so we're a little closer to what we're going to include in the budget request. I think as about every year, you know, as council, as older persons, you're gonna find some difficulty, because I know there's other departments that have some real imminent needs as well. So I know we've gotta make some tough decisions, and the chips fall how the chips fall, but I just wanted to give everyone a perspective of what these costs are and what it might cost to be sustainable.
All right. Item number 5, discuss referral to review alternate side parking ordinance.
I did wanna bring up real quick,
Oops.
I'm
The
sorry.
last one?
On the last one, I
Okay,
apologize.
Back up a little bit.
On the screen, what I have, and I think on your packet there's a PDF of it, is a map that shows in color the streets that are 50 years old and older. These are streets that are already obsolete. Really anything 40 years old and older needs to be on a short list, but at 50 years, those streets are really obsolete. And again, thank goodness we have some good soils in a good part of the town where, we're able to continually do chip seal maintenance beyond what one would expect a serviceable life for extending with chip seal. But this helps put it in perspective, and what I don't have on this map, and I was showing staff earlier today, is really anything that was built prior to 1980 is on that short list, and it's a very significant part of the city is had its streets constructed prior to 1980. Between the years of 1965 and 1980, just in those few years, over 40 miles of streets were built in the city. And so what we're gonna see happen is deterioration at a very rapid pace. And that's not unlike most of the utilities that are also under the streets. So the challenge is trying to, we can't patch a street and be real happy about it if the street needs to be repaired with 40 years of expected life left or 30 years of expected life left in the infrastructure. Because if we can get 60 years out of the street, then the new street's only gonna be half worn out when we need to replace it again. So, the challenge is trying to build what we like to call perfect projects, where we're trying, it's planned obsolescence, where we're trying to make the street last until the infrastructure is dead and do it all at once. And that's, with the amount of work that needs to be done within the city, that's a real challenge right now. But I think the picture kind of helps put into perspective a little bit what, let me zoom out just a little bit so we can get full corporate limits. I don't think it's gonna let me do it real well. But you can see, just about half the streets fall into this category.
Scott?
When they replace the streets, will they be putting a telephone or electric under the ground? Because in those areas, most of them are poles, and the poles are quite old. I go to the meetings, and they mention how they have to replace so many poles. And I would think too, with the electric outage, that as they replace those, it'd be nice to get the electric underneath the.
Well, in most cases, that can be done independently of the projects. In some cases, they'll want to do it in conjunction with the projects. It's going to depend on the condition of that infrastructure and how challenging it is. Because of the shallow nature of the ability to bury electric cable,
You could do it anywhere.
you can directionally bore it, on a complete project and make it effective. So, but we certainly want to be having these discussions early on in the design process so that the opportunity for upgrades, not only for our own utilities, but for We Energies, Charter Communications, Solaris, any of the other utilities, that they've got the opportunity to take the time they need to plan and try to get, so, our goal has been, and we're striving towards getting our plans done a year in advance. So
They can plug in.
everybody's got time to plan and try to make adjustments as needed. We're not there yet, but I'm expecting that we will be within a year from now. Sorry, Tom.
That's a lot to put on our plate, but it's gotta be done.
Oh, it is.
Well, we need to be
It's gotta
cognizant.
be
of it.
done to look at, so we got the, real picture to look at for.
That's right.
I'm gonna be making this map.
You can't look 10 years down the road and then say, oh my
Oops.
gosh.
I'm gonna be making this map available to all of our older persons and on our city website as well. this map will be public, so you can click on each street, and it might take a little bit of deciphering because the fields are set up under a state surface condition analysis, so a lot of the information might really seem strange. But if you want to see the age, the latest pavement rating condition, those types of things, it would let you and the folks in the city that want to take a look at it explore it for themselves. So we're going to make this available.
Okay. Is that it then? Then we'll go
It
to
is.
item 5. Discuss referral to review alternate side parking ordinance.
Okay, so we had a referral by the Public Works Committee to take a look at that alternate side parking ordinance and determine if it might be something that we'd like to change. Staff's reviewed it and discussed the matter with the police department and has determined that while it may be reasonable to consider relaxing restrictions for public works activities, we've been informed by the police department that open parking has actually been tried in the past, and it became a real problem for the police department. Essentially, there were some folks really trying to, whether intentional or not, abusing the privilege. A significant number of people tended to park their worst vehicles in front of a neighbor's house or across the street indefinitely. And that resulted in a significant increase in abandoned and disabled vehicle complaints, and then of course the time required by the police department to try to enforce those rules, which tend to be a little tougher. It's not quite as black and white as alternate side parking. So as a result of that, staff recommends that no changes be made currently to the alternate side parking ordinance.
I don't know, I guess, just from some phone calls that I've gotten from people, they're not parking them on the street, they're parking them up in their lawns now. That's also an ordinance violation. And Ray, I guess, probably has a heck of a time keeping up on that. There's so many of them, he says, down 14th Street. It's pretty bad there. I mean, drive through town on a given day, I see a lot of vehicles up in the lawns. I know it's not desirable to have them on the streets either, but we have an ordinance that says you can't have them in the lawns either, and we have that problem. I think if somebody does put a vehicle out in the street and they abandon it, you should be able to tow it and cite the owner, just be done with the problem.
I think one of the challenges there is when it's in the yard, it's a code enforcement issue that is Ray's responsibility. And when it's in the street, the police department end up doing it. And of course, there's only so much that any department or staff can do, but you know, when you're looking at the various priorities for those departments, the recommendation was that you know, police department have, we'll say, bigger and better fish to catch, then they have to spend more time on parking enforcement.
And they may not.
But I agree with you. I mean,
They may not know it's abandoned either. I mean, on the street.
right.
It would take maybe 3 or 4 weeks or a month, and then they have to prove it was abandoned, and that might be so convoluted. I agree with the concept, but it creates, I think, I know of some of the residents in my district would just park some cars, it'd be their parking lot, their driveway, and it would be inconvenient for a lot of people. Then you have kids playing around them and running through them. And I don't know, I think conceptually, initially I thought it was a great idea, but now I think it can create more problems than the problem it supposedly would be taken care of. So I don't know.
The chief had suggested that at least with the way it is now, if someone has a vehicle that isn't operating, you know, they have to at least move it. It's inconvenient versus, you know, if it stands for quite a while. In any case, so after those discussions, again, I think there could be some improvements as far as the ability to perform some public works operations, but certainly not willing to make a recommendation in light of the problems mentioned by the PD. So that's just staff's recommendation.
I guess initially when I got the phone call too on it, it was just a resident that he moved up here and he was unaware of the policy, but I think he's aware of it now. I haven't got any more phone calls from him for getting ticketed, so I'm okay with leaving it as well then too, but I think in the other hand, just as far as people parking vehicles up where they shouldn't be parked and the eyesore that creates in the city, we need to probably start looking at doing something with that then too.
We can certainly try to, we are in the process of working with our IT staff on updating the city's website and including GIS mapping capabilities, where we could, it may not highlight specifically the alternate side parking areas, but we could, include that description in that page on parking and try to include some maps to kind of show where parking is allowed and where it isn't, and try to do a better job of communicating that.
And maybe the police could be softer on a ticketing on the street, warnings versus a ticket right away, one of those deals.
If they had, some of those houses, I know they got 6 vehicles there, and
Yeah.
4 on the lawns or whatever.
Yeah.
If they're all used during the day, I don't know why they can't park them on the street, the correct side.
Yeah.
Odd and even, why they have to pull them up on
And get
the
parking
grass,
the
and
other
that would
way.
suffice with what the ordinance is.
Yeah.
If they're all being used, it somewhat lends the thing to they're not being used. So that would lend credence to if you had both sides that they're gonna leave them on the street.
Yeah.
Maybe rotate them every week or whatever it is, or ones don't work and they're gonna
Push
leave
them to
on
the other
street,
side.
or whatever, yeah. So, I guess, when we went through this, and this took a long time for us to end up with this, that, I guess, stay with the way we have the program is I would just, stay with it.
If I may just,
We just, it's just 2, is that 3-hour window in there? That we, the parking really, you can't park 3 to 6, I think it is, or something like that.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact
That's
hours, but it is
whatever,
a
it's
pretty
just a
short
short window that really is the time frame. So,
if I could just
Yes.
share with you guys too, I was out at IGA last week, and another customer in the building approached me, and she was really irate with some of the things that the city's let go. She's a resident up on 14th Avenue, and or 14th Street, and she was very upset with the amount of vehicles that have been up in the yard with what she says is lack of enforcement, and she questioned if we're gonna have the ordinance, why even have it there if we're not gonna enforce it. And then, I don't know if any of you gentlemen have driven by 15th and Baker and seen the lawn with about 20 mattresses out there.
yeah, in the last week or so, yeah.
She pointed out that it ought to be an embarrassment to the city that this stuff is happening and we're not being proactive on it. So she really asked for better enforcement of our ordinances for people to keep their properties picked up and prevent that stuff from happening.
I think it's a good opportunity to plug our C-Click Fix web app. For our ordinance enforcement officer, when they're enforcing the ordinances, they don't have an opportunity to go and look for issues, but you can do it online or with a mobile smartphone. Use the C-Click Fix app and make notice of those types of violations so that our ordinance enforcement department can take care of it.
I think that case, and it has been totally resolved, I think it may be resolved, but hasn't been resolved on Baker there. Is
Okay.
that, I think, I don't think anybody's left there, but and that's what happened benches and that they're out on the street. Why they threw them like that and just left, I don't know, but the complaint was there is how the yard was and everything, how it looked, abandoned vehicles and this and that, garage and everything. And, but I think it's in the last week or so that the mattresses and all that were just thrown out on the curb. But I'm gonna check into that too, to see what, what's gonna be done with it, how we're gonna get rid of it, or what the next step is. But it's been a long process, and to get to where it is now, it looks probably worse than what it did before.
I think that C-Click Fix is a great app, and I've used it a couple times, and I think people, we were introduced to it, but it'd be interesting if we could keep that out front. I mean, Ray has so much time, can do so much, and it seems like if we could, on our website, or, I'm just brainstorming, but you know, when you give out your tax bill at the beginning of the year for, you know, if a slip in there could be telling people how to get to it. I mean, we could multiply the raise in the city if we get that out front. Some people don't have a knowledge of it. You know, once they know, which I could do it, they'll put it on there. So, I mean, I guess to be more proactive in getting that out to people.
Sure.
Might start to take care of some of those problems, because it is a nice app. And it's all confidential, they just put it in. I know quite often my residents get worried about, you know, if their neighbor and confidentiality and stuff, but this is confidential, and it's, I think, really advantageous, so.
I think maybe just to piggyback on what you said, we'll put in information in the tax bill too. Maybe put, like, if a problem is if a property isn't explaining some of these problems, the person who's gonna end up paying the taxes on that property get a notice of some sort, because it might be one way to just address it, because I don't think a lot of people necessarily go to the city website to look for stuff, but
Yeah.
ultimately the property owner is gonna be the one that's responsible for it in the end, so it might be a better way to.
Having some of the more common offenses, you know, parking, not on concrete on your driveway, you know, lawns, and, you know, like maybe there's 4 that if we talk to Ray, what are the 4 most common that you really don't have time, or it's a challenge, and then list those, because people may use it then, so.
So we're gonna leave it at the alternate side, parking? Okay,
And I would.
it's fine with me. Item number 6, discuss condition and plans for multi-use trail along 2nd Avenue South between Hurley Street and 2nd Avenue, Seneca Road. You're right. Yeah.
So this section of multi-use trail, if you're not familiar with that area, runs really parallel along State Highway 54, 2nd Avenue South. It's obsolete, it's deteriorated. The city hasn't been maintaining it because it's no longer a part of the trail connection system, but it still exists, and it's becoming in a condition that's a liability. So staff's looking for permission from the council to obliterate it and restore it back to natural sod.
I make a motion to accept the staff recommendation to replace the former multi-use trail with topsoil and sod.
I'll second that. Committee, Scott, any questions?
No question.
Okay, good. All in favor? Committee?
Aye.
All opposed, I guess we can't impose, we all vote aye. Passes. Let's see, 7, review referral list.
So I think we could cross off number 22. That's our alternate side parking referral.
Joe, on item number 5, for those permissive yellow flashing arrows, with some of those intersections we redid, like on A Street and Grand Avenue, are those lights able to be programmed with a flashing yellow?
The controllers are, the issue that we ran into it kind of twofold, but mainly related to funding. There wasn't enough funding, nor was there enough right-of-way, enough real estate to have the mounted two arms as just a single mast, or you could have a head per lane. That's a requirement of the flashing yellow arrows, so it's kind of a can of worms that the grant funding, there wasn't enough money to fund it, nor did we have enough real estate, enough room to actually put those structures out there. So
So it was considered.
It was considered, definitely. We'd hoped to get them for both of those intersections, but getting into it, it just wasn't a feasible option for us. But the controllers do have the functionality. There's always opportunities down the road if they're warranted.
I also believe that as we look at the controllers at Lincoln and the Expressway.
Yep. That'll also be reviewed for that intersection.
That might be an important one.
That's all done, I guess, we'll, see with that referral that, maybe take it off and.
Well, I think
Either
at least for the time being.
Yeah, leave it on for now.
We'll leave it on until we either have a few of them or decide that,
Mhm.
so that it's a standard practice. We know that the council and the committee's interested in,
Yep.
that as part of the regular review.
I think if it can be done, it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, should be a checklist.
Yeah.
Should be on it.
Is there anything else? I think that was it.
No, that's it, I think. Well, if there's hearing none, we can move to the next item, and that's the motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Motion is second to adjourn, all in favor, respond by aye.
Aye.
Opposed, ayes have it. Meeting's adjourned at 6:52 PM.